I'm Jim. It was Halloween, but I wasn't at a costume party, though 10 people in the next room were dressed as cops. I didn't bring a jacket because it was 80 degrees outside in the warm Fort Lauderdale sun. I sat in the very cold police interrogation room, shivering for almost an hour before the two detectives walked in. I didn't know which one was the good cop. I did know that one was the tall, fat cop, and the other was short and skinny. If this was a Law and Order episode, they would have offered me coffee so they could obtain the DNA from my used coffee cup, but these two weren't that smart. Where were you yesterday evening between 5 and 6 p.m.? I took out my iPhone and began recording the interrogation. They insisted that I put away the phone, but I reminded them that the Supreme Court said that every citizen had right to record any interaction with the police. They persisted until I informed them that by violating my rights, they would lose their qualified immunity. I asked if either of them owned homes, which I could attach after I won judgments against them. The short, skinny one got up and violently shook my chair, throwing me to the ground. He warned me that I might fall down a flight of stairs if I didn't shut off the phone. He grabbed the iPhone and shut it off. He didn't know about, and I didn't stop, the secret digital audio recorder in my pants pocket that was also making a record of his threats. Apparently, my ex-wife's current husband, a heart surgeon, was attacked, tasered, and robbed in the hospital parking garage. When he refused to surrender his wallet, the fingers on both of his hands, his operating hands, were crushed beneath the assailant's boots, ending his professional life, then kicked him in his testicles, ending his sex life. His days as a high and mighty surgeon who took whatever he wanted, including my wife, were now over. Naturally, I was the prime suspect because of the way he and my ex-wife had publicly humiliated me, legally stole my children, and left me destitute. But I didn't beat him. There was probably a long line of men who wanted to beat the crap out of him. I knew that I wasn't the only husband he had cucked. There were at least 3 others. I assumed the cops knew that, or soon would. The skinny cop claimed that my silence was obstruction of justice, and they could arrest me for that alone. So, you never heard of the Fifth Amendment? I asked. Then I affirmatively invoked my Fifth Amendment right to remain silent and said nothing further. That really pissed them off. They claimed that I was in a hospital parking lot where I brutally beat up the doctor who stole my wife from me. I remained silent. They told me that if I confessed, the DA would go easier on me. They understood my anger at the doctor who stole my wife and daughters away from me. One even claimed that he would have done the same if he were in my shoes. I remained silent. They claimed I was photographed on garage security cameras, and there were witnesses who could identify me. It would be a slam dunk case against me with 20 years in prison unless I confessed my guilt and begged for mercy. Listen, fellows, I said. I came here voluntarily after you phoned me. Since you have no proof of any involvement on my part and are just ideally speculating, am I free to go or am I under arrest? I asked. I'm going to put you away for 20 years when I get evidence against you. You made at least one mistake, and when I find it, your butt will be mine. The larger, fatter one screamed at me. I got up and left. They made no attempt to stop me. The next day at work, the same 2 detectives came to question me again, and also to question my coworkers. The cops were shocked to learn that I was at a retirement dinner in my Miami office dining room along with 20 witnesses. Several of my coworkers showed the detectives time-stamped videos of me giving a speech to our retiring friend. I had been over 25 miles away, and with Southern Florida traffic, over an hour from the crime scene in Fort Lauderdale at the time of the attack. The skinny officer asked me why I didn't merely tell them that yesterday. I didn't answer. So, you paid someone else to do it. We'll subpoena your bank accounts and find out how much money you paid the assailant. Then we'll track all your phone calls until we can nail your hide to the wall. These detectives had watched almost as many episodes of Law and Order as I had. We all knew the drill. They had nothing. There were no significant cash withdrawals. There were no incriminating phone calls. The cameras in the garage had been spray painted over an hour before the attack by a masked, blonde-haired woman in a dress. They didn't yet know that. I never again heard from the police, but my ex-wife phoned me screaming about my ruining her husband's surgical career, and she would make damn sure I never again saw my daughters. So, what's new? I responded. You haven't let my daughters see me in months. Good luck making those enormous mortgage payments now that your husband is permanently out of a job. You can kiss the good life and your sex life goodbye, I said and hung up. I looked at the liquor cabinet in my kitchen, still filled with 10 bottles of my wife's favorite wines and liquors. It was all that my ex-wife left when she walked out on me. I'm not much of a drinker, but I do love Four Roses bourbon, so I filled up a glass with some and lighted Don Diego cigar. It was an expensive luxury that I only allowed myself once or twice a year for special celebratory evenings like this one.
I'm Barry.
It was 3 days after my company's Christmas party, and I was almost sober. Two police detectives came to my office in New Hope, Pennsylvania and asked me questions about a taser attack on my ex-wife's current husband, a violinist for the Philadelphia Orchestra, in a parking garage 25 miles away 3 nights before at 9 p.m. His wallet was stolen and the fingers on his hands were crushed, ending his musical future, and a hard kick between his legs ended his sexual future. I'm not answering any questions, I said. Your ex-wife identified you as the assailant, the Hispanic cop stated. So you're under arrest. They took out a pair of handcuffs and told me to place my hands behind my back. My wife lied to you and filed a false police report. She's the one you should arrest, and I'll file a complaint against you too if you don't. I refused to allow them to handcuff me. They threatened me with an additional charge or resisting arrest as they pulled out a taser. I called in my secretary and asked her where I was 3 nights before at 9 p.m. She turned to the detectives. Barry and the rest of the staff were here getting plastered at our annual Christmas party. She took out her iPhone and showed the detectives at least a dozen times stamped photos and a video of me dancing on a tabletop with a drink in my hand. She laughed. He's not much of a dancer, but I don't think that's a crime. Though if you heard him sing that night, you might arrest him for murdering the song, Strangers in the Night. My secretary brought in a half dozen of my coworkers to confirm my alibi without her prompting them as to the where and when. Several of them also showed the detectives time-stamped videos of me dancing on the tabletop, making a drunken fool of myself. It was obvious to anyone that I didn't commit the crime, but the detectives couldn't mentally switch gears and still tried to handcuff me until I explained that there were now plenty of witnesses who would support my lawsuit against them personally for false arrest. I said I would take their houses from them and throw them and their families out in the street. The detectives put away their handcuffs and instead demanded my cell phone. I assured them I would produce it as soon as they produced a search warrant. They silently left. I didn't go home for dinner. Neither did I go to my usual restaurant, McDonald's, which is all I could afford. Instead, I went to an expensive steakhouse to celebrate. I phoned my ex-wife and told her to expect a lawsuit for filing a false police report against me. She screamed at me that once again I had ruined her life. I told her that the police said her husband would never again be able to play the violin. That's a tough break. I guess he can teach music in an elementary school, though at a much reduced salary than you're both used to. The police told me about your husband's damaged testicles. How is your sex life? You're an a-hole, she screamed. I know, and you're the woman who turned me into one. I'm Jim. 3 months earlier, I traveled from my home in hot, humid Fort Lauderdale, Florida, to visit my mother and to attend my 20th high school reunion in chilly and foggy San Francisco, with 20 pounds more and a lot less hair than I had at my high school graduation. I wore a new suit because I wanted to look good in case any of the girls I liked back then were single. I was early and didn't recognize the few people who were already there. All of a sudden, I was being bear-hugged by a bald-headed man I didn't recognize. Jim, he said. I'm Barry. After all those years, I still recognize that voice. Tears came to my eyes as I hugged back my high school best friend and fellow third-string benchwarmer for our high school football team. One day, the coach found some marijuana in an unassigned locker. The weed belonged to Barry and me, but he couldn't prove it. The police were called in and separated us. They claimed to me that Barry said I did it. They told Barry that I claimed that he did it. They offered each of us immunity if we would testify against the other. We trusted each other and knew that the police were lying when they claimed that we each incriminated the other. We remained silent, which really pissed them off, so they beat us up in front of Coach, who didn't try to stop them. We knew not to fight back, but still we remained silent. Since they had no proof against either of us, nothing else happened. The coach, who was half our size, saw the blood coming from my nose and Barry's black eye and laughed at us. He said we got what we deserved and he hoped we'd learned a lesson. We both gave him the finger and told him to stick it up his butt and to start looking over his shoulder or something bad might happen to him too. We were of course thrown off of the team, but didn't give a shit since we hadn't once played. We waited a month and flattened a tire on Coach's car, then another month and another tire. We learned that day that we could depend on one another for protection and could trust that we would always have one another's back. I used to feel that way about my ex-wife. Boy, was I wrong. Barry and I went to colleges thousands of miles apart after graduation, and this was our first meeting since graduation day. I learned that Barry now lived in a suburb of Philadelphia. He was in advertising and I was a real estate salesman in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. We talked as if our last conversation was last week. We still felt that same camaraderie that we felt 20 years earlier. During the first 2 glasses of bourbon that we shared, it seemed that all was well in our lives. By the 4th glass, we started revealing ourselves truthfully to one another. I told Barry things I would never tell any other person. I had no friend or family to whom I would reveal the true pain and hell I experienced from my humiliation and divorce. 15 years ago, I was in a motorcycle accident. Arlene had first been my nurse and then later my wife. She called me an organ donor in waiting because I rode a motorcycle in a town filled with senile old people. She was right, of course. I was hit by a 95-year-old woman who was driving the wrong way down a one-way street. When I asked Arlene to marry me, she agreed on condition that I stop riding motorcycles. I did. I made a good living in real estate and life was good, until a real estate downturn cut down my income significantly for over a year. That cut down on my wife's ability to buy luxuries for herself, and she started belittling me and criticizing my now reduced income. She didn't require a lover with 6 inches below the belt, but a 6-figure income was apparently an absolute necessity to turn her on. My ex-wife had been cheating on me behind my back for over 6 months, and I never suspected a thing, though I should have. Almost every time in the last few months, I tried to be intimate with her, she had a headache. The few times we did have intimacy, she would ask me to hurry up and finish. She wasn't coming home late, but even though her body came home on time, her mind was somewhere else. Our daughters even complained to me that their mother was ignoring them. She was a nurse, and 2 years ago, I accompanied her to a hospital fundraising event. She wasn't dressed conservatively as would be expected of a nurse, but like a movie version of a high-end call girl. She had a great body, and everyone at the event was drooling over her. She and I were seated when Dr. Dan, a very wealthy surgeon, asked her to dance, without first asking me for permission. After they danced 2 slow dances in a row much too closely and with his hands on her bum, I tried to cut in, but Dr. Dan in a very loud voice exclaimed that my wife no longer belonged to a loser like me, but to a real man like him. He and my wife laughed at my bewildered face, and were joined by others who knew they were a couple for more than 6 months. They all reveled in my humiliation as 2 burly security guards came over, grabbed and forced me outside even though I'd done nothing aggressive. This was all prearranged. I realized that my mortification got the doctor off. I made an oath that he was going to pay for this. He didn't just want to destroy my marriage, he wanted to destroy me. The public humiliation was a big mistake on his part. If it was the last thing I ever did, Dr. Dan would pay for this. If I had a gun on me, then I would have blown his head, or at least his balls off without a care about going to prison. When I returned home, my daughters and the babysitter weren't there. There was a note explaining that my daughters had moved into the doctor house while we were at the fundraiser. There were also divorce papers with an order restraining me from contacting my wife, our children, or her doctor lover. All of their clothes and my wife's clothes were gone, as was all the money in our bank accounts. He was 10 years older than I, and while my family had lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment, he lived in a 6,000 square foot mansion with a swimming pool and tennis court. At first, my wife forced my daughters to call him dad, but now it was second nature to them. They loved being the daughters of a wealthy doctor and shunned me because I wasn't rich, and their mother and stepfather constantly belittled me to them. Their mother told them that I made no effort to visit them, which was a lie. Their mother lied to them and said that the doctor supported them and that I paid no child support. That too was a lie. About a third of my after-tax income went to child support. A year later, while at the supermarket, I saw a husband and wife who had witnessed my wife leaving me at the banquet, and as they stood at the frozen food counter, they laughed at me. I saw their car in the parking lot, and remembering what my friend and I did to our high school coach's car, I stuck a penknife into one of their tires. It wasn't much, but it was a start on payback time, a first payment if you will. No matter how much I paid my lawyer, my ex-wife always found a way to sabotage my relationship with my 3 daughters. The courts always sided with her because I was guilty of having a male organ. She canceled my visits with them at the last minute after I drove 50 miles to Dan's mansion for the visit, then laughed at me at the front door. I started crying in Barry's arms. I was so embarrassed, but I needed to finally open up about my pain to someone. When I was done crying, Barry put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Ditto." I asked him what he meant. He said he had the same story, except he had only one daughter. Barry's wife, Connie, was a violinist in a major philharmonic orchestra which toured all over the world. They met one day in a musical instrument store. Barry was buying new guitar strings, and his future wife needed new strings for her violin. They bonded over their love of music with a cup of coffee. Barry didn't play guitar professionally, and in truth he wasn't that good, but he loved playing for his own enjoyment and eventually that of their daughter. Connie traveled a great deal, and Barry took care of their daughter in his wife's absence. Barry said that in hindsight, the only problem he saw on the horizon was the way his ex-wife grabbed the guitar from his hands one day. She screamed that if he sang Baby Beluga to their daughter one more time, she would break the guitar over his head. He and his daughter were very close. His daughter loved that song and demanded that he play and sing it to her every night at dinner. Connie calmed down and tried to explain that she had perfect pitch and his off-key singing and guitar playing was pure torture to her. Connie eventually left him for Harvey, another violinist in the orchestra. Barry, his parents, his wife and daughter were at a steakhouse restaurant celebrating Barry's birthday. They had just been seated when the other man waltzed into the restaurant along with a big bodyguard and sat down uninvited at their table. Barry's wife explained that she and the other violinist were in love, and she was leaving her husband. She said it loudly enough so most of the restaurant could hear her. She and her lover wanted him humiliated. She, the other man and her daughter got up and left. When Barry tried to grab the hand of his daughter, the big bruiser grabbed Barry by the neck, choking him and pushed him back in his chair by painfully bending his wrist almost to the breaking point. Barry grabbed his steak knife and slashed the guy's wrist. Blood spurted all over the table as Barry ran out of the restaurant. It was too late. His daughter and wife were gone. The police decided that Barry acted in self-defense and the big bruiser was convicted of false imprisonment. The big guy's wrist tendon was severed, and he would never have full use of his right hand. He vowed revenge on Barry when he got out of prison, but nothing came of it. Still, Barry carried a gun for a few months when the police notified Barry that the big guy was released from jail. Barry's only regret was that he slashed the bruiser's wrist and not the wrist of his wife's violinist lover, ending his career. Everyone in the orchestra knew for months that she was cheating on Barry, but none of them said a word to him. He had thought that these people were also his friends. He'd known them for many years. She left Barry, took their daughter, and all of his money. While Barry lived in a 3-story walk-up apartment. Barry's daughter, his ex-wife, and her new husband all lived in Barry's house. Barry still paid the mortgage and taxes on it, while his wife's lover lived there for free. Barry too had a hard time visiting with and maintaining a relationship with his daughter. Neither Barry or I had cheated on our wives. We didn't know why they hated us so much, but they did. Now, of course, we hated them even more than they hated us. We shared our revenge daydreams. I leaned towards a shotgun blast between the doctor's legs, while Barry was partial to hanging his ex-wife's husband from a lamppost by his balls. We actually started laughing about these absurd fantasies, but agreed that we both needed revenge to again feel like men. We talked about how much we wanted to beat the shit out of the 2 men who had ruined our lives and humiliated us. We also talked about our desire to avoid jail. As we looked into each other's eyes, we realized that we really had to get our revenge if we were ever wanted to move on with our lives. It wasn't optional. If our wives had just said they wanted divorces, Barry and I would of course be heartbroken, but wouldn't have had this primal need for revenge. It was the way they publicly humiliated us that required, no, demanded revenge. I thought for a moment and came up with a possible answer based on a movie I once saw with my oldest daughter. I told him our solution may lie in an old Alfred Hitchcock movie. Barry asked what Rear Window had to do with our plight. I shook my head no. Birds? He asked. Again, I shook my head no. 39 steps, spellbound? Finally, I blurted out, Strangers on a Train. Barry didn't know that movie. It's about 2 strangers, each of whom wants to kill someone. They can't because they would each be the prime suspect, but if they each had airtight alibis when they killed each other's nemesis, they wouldn't be caught. Barry immediately understood. So, if I have an airtight alibi, and you beat the shit out of my wife's lover and I do the same for you, we both walk away untouched. Exactly, I answered. Without 4 glasses of bourbon each, I don't know if this idea would have sounded so appealing. Barry, let's get out of here now before people notice us speaking together. We don't want any witnesses that we still know each other. We left separately and met up at a restaurant a few blocks away. Unlike the Hitchcock movie, we didn't plan on killing anyone, just painfully ruining their lives and crushing their egos like they had crushed ours. We agreed not to hurt our ex-wives, as tempting as it seemed, because they were still the mothers of our daughters. We knew their financial ruin would be collateral damage, but we could live with that. Hell, we would revel in it. I felt better than I had felt since that night when my wife danced off with Dr. Dan. Her surgeon boyfriend paid for the costliest, nastiest divorce lawyer on earth to represent her, take away my children and make my life hell. I exhausted my savings paying lawyers to unsuccessfully fight them until all my savings were gone and I lived from paycheck to paycheck. Barry and I drank a lot of coffee to sober up and ate too many fried onion rings as we hatched our plan. Our waitress was pretty and wore tights that hugged a great bum. We each looked at her just once and then went back to our project. The first order of business was to begin withdrawing cash from our banks in small amounts that wouldn't later attract any police interest if either of us became suspects. We would each need a few thousand untraceable dollars. Then we would buy 2 untraceable throwaway cell phones with which to communicate with each other, steel boots, and a taser for each of us. Barry visited casinos in Atlantic City to account for the $500 or more he withdrew from the bank each week. I did the same with the Seminole Casino in Hollywood, Florida. We kept the receipts for the chips we bought even though we cashed the chips in those same nights. To raise even more cash, Barry sold his guitar collection on eBay, and I sold my expensive stereo and camera equipment. We agreed that for a month after each of us completed our task, we would still withdraw money and go to the casinos. Then we would join Gamblers Anonymous and stop going to casinos. Since the police would subpoena our internet search histories, we were careful to do any incriminating searches, like Amtrak train schedules, on computers at our local libraries. Upon returning to our present cities, our first order of business was to track our targets and try to find a good place and time for payback. We couldn't fly to the other city at payback time because that would leave a paper trail with our IDs needed to buy airline tickets. We would use Amtrak, which doesn't demand IDs. We would literally become strangers on a train. Within an hour of each attack, the attacker would be on a train in a private compartment, so no one would recognize us heading home with no record of having been out of town. His ex-wife's new husband was now an unemployed fiddler, and his ex-wife didn't make enough money to support her daughter. When his ex-wife and the orchestra left on a 3-month world tour, Barry regained custody of his daughter. His ex-wife divorced her second husband. She tried to crawl back to Barry, but he laughed in her face as he slammed his front door closed. Barry's final revenge was the court order allowing him to move back into his house with his daughter while his wife had nowhere to go. I too gained primary legal custody of my daughters. My ex and her husband no longer lived in a mansion, but a 2-bedroom apartment in a less than desirable part of town. He had earned a fortune, but spent it a little faster than he earned it and was heavily in debt. He felt that he would always be able to earn more. A strategic mistake it now seems. My daughter's stepfather was no longer the egotistical successful doctor who lorded his superiority over everyone he met. His ego was destroyed along with his hands and his testicles. People will put up with a lot of shit from a prick who's rich. Now that he was a poor prick, he no longer received the adulation he had been addicted to. 6 months after his attack, he drank all day and commented on how pretty my daughters were becoming. The girl's mother refused to admonish her husband and may have even encouraged it. He would frequently comment on their maturing bodies, and one day he fondled my oldest daughter. My daughters were scared for their safety. When she phoned me to tell me, I fought the urge to visit the doctor and finish the job that Barry had begun, but instead I phoned the police. Since he could no longer afford to pay for an expensive shark of an attorney. When the police tried to arrest the doctor, his wife begged our daughter not to press charges. My daughter agreed on the condition that my wife relinquish custody of her and her sisters to me. I won 100% custody based on the disturbing testimony of my daughters about their stepfather's sexual assault, which was verified by Child Protective Services who supported my petition for full custody. A man seeking justice may not always find it in family court, but sometimes he does. Sometime, though, he has to go to the streets. Barry and I never again communicated after payback time to protect ourselves. We next saw each other at our 25th high school reunion 5 years, and 6 months later after the statute of limitations had run out on our crimes in both Florida and Pennsylvania. We were now also immune from any civil suits our ex-wives or their husbands might wish to bring. After the reunion, we took our daughters, Barry's new wife, and my girlfriend to Disneyland. That night, Barry and I were busy, getting drunk and laughing for reasons we could not reveal to anyone else. We had gotten away with our revenge, and in 5 years no one had figured it out. We couldn't stop laughing as we each shared for the first time what we had individually done to each other's targets. I told Barry how his wife's husband cried and begged for mercy, pleading with me not to hurt his hands. He told me how my ex-wife's husband wet his pants as he tried to run away and ran head first into a cement pillar, knocking himself out. Our daughters bonded together and discussed the coincidence of how and when their stepfathers were injured. All of them except my oldest daughter called it karma. She just began laughing uncontrollably. The next morning, as we all took a bus to the airport, my oldest daughter whispered in my ear that she loved me and also loved the Hitchcock movie, Strangers on a Train. Dear listeners, sending loads of love to Ronald Burns for his contribution, and to all our listeners, thank you for being part of this literary journey with us. You can check out Ron's work at Amazon, and we have shared the links in the description box below. And if you want to share your work with us, please send your work at the email mentioned in the description box, and we will publish it for our listeners at Lost Love Chronicles. Please share your thoughts in the comments section, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. My name is Cassandra, and I have a sister 6 years older than me. She has already been married and divorced before turning 30 from cheating on her part. We grew up in a home where our father cheated on our mother constantly and saw all the arguments and torment from him, leaving evidence in the house of having his other women over while mom was at work and using her personal items to trying to affect our living situation once she finally separated from him and kicked him out the house after my sister graduated high school. I remember asking Mom, why did she wait so long to leave him? And her answer was that she wanted to wait until my sister graduated from high school. Evidently, she wanted to leave him a few years earlier and move to another city. But my sister had a meltdown saying she wanted to graduate with all her friends. This hurt me because, what about my feelings? Needless to say, with the age difference and her feelings always seeming to take precedence, we were never close. She was more like a distant aunt rather a sister. Since my sister's divorce and turning 30, she has entered a true, dirty 30s mentality, having lots of casual and unprotected sex, which culminated in her catching herpes. Still, she continues her wild and carefree ways, with both single and married men, in which I'm highly doubtful that she informs anyone of her condition. She's always been able to justify that it's always someone else's fault in one way or another. Although our city is not small, since we grew up here all our lives it can seem that way. We can be on the opposite side of town than we grew up and still run into someone we know from back in the day, either from school, sports, or other extracurriculars, jobs, etc. Although we ran in completely different circles, people still knew we were sisters, and information about her would get back to me and vice versa. This also caused more distance between us because although I didn't care or repeat info about her ways and antics, anytime she wanted to make herself look good by making me look bad, she would run to Mom and tell her, or make up, whatever she'd learn. For example, someone saw me drinking underage or kissing a boyfriend. So on to the current catastrophe. I have been dating my fiancé for 4 years now. He proposed on my 27th birthday at a nice dinner with my mom, his parents and siblings, my closest cousin, and my best friend. Normally I'd hate a public engagement, but it was so romantic and unexpected. I was truly over the moon. Everyone was happy for us. Not only at our table, but the whole restaurant was clapping, taking pictures, and some were even tearing up along with me. All of a sudden, 2 months later, my sister wants to constantly stop by our house or hang out with us. This has my antennas on high alert. When she comes over, she wants to get us to drink and is a little too comfortable in our home. Since she did one of her pop-ups on us right when I was getting ready to make dinner, I had to run to the store for a few extra ingredients to have enough for her as well. Does she ever contribute? No. After pulling out of the driveway and halfway down our street, I realized that I forgot that I had my cash in my pants pocket from work and had to go back to the house. Can anyone guess what I walked into? There is my sister with my fiancé having sex. I saw red, slammed the door and shouted, "What the hell?" My fiancé looked like a deer in headlights and my sister had a smug look on her face and said, "She might as well find out now." Fiancé is doing the guppy face with his mouth opening and closing, not knowing what to say. I started to tear up and turned around and walked back out and got back into my car. I mean, like, why? Why would she do this to me? I'm her freaking sister. Regardless if we are close or not, I'm her freaking sister. Not knowing what else to do but to get out of there before I caught a charge. Blindly, I drove to my cousin's house, who called over my best friend with a bottle of peach brandy. We were well past wine, and I told them everything from my sister's sudden visits lately to what I just walked in on. By the end of telling them everything, I had to stop them from going to look for my sister. My fiancé is blowing up my phone with sorries, and it's not what it looked like. Then the texts and calls start blowing up on my cousin and bestie's phones. I never responded and told them not to either. Maybe it was the brandy, but I went from hurt to angry to devious, and I wanted revenge. I know all his passwords and logged onto his phone bill to read all his text messages, and I mean all of them. My sister has been chasing him for long before he proposed. He pushed her off for a long time and eventually fell for her dirtiness. I felt sick. I've already told him about her STD, and he still screwed around with her. And then me. Cue vomiting. Immediate plans to call my doctor in the morning for an urgent STD test. If they pass that mess on to me, it may be a murder case. I found pictures and videos, on top of the text saying that she could do so much more than I ever could. He seemed to be full of guilt at first, then went with the flow eventually. I thought I had found the complete opposite of my dad, yet here I was with a FING cheater. Then comes the self-reflection. Did I miss red flags? What did I do wrong? Etc. Then come the phone calls from mom. When I answer, she is yelling that my sister called her about how I was so hostile to her. Blah, blah, blah. I lost it. Finally, the first time ever, I stood up to my mom regarding my sister. Shut up and listen, Mom. Did that hussy tell you she's been sleeping with my fiancé for the past 4 months? Did she tell you that she's been chasing him on purpose to hurt and demean me? And you have the nerve to call and chastise me for my sister's BS again. I'm tired of taking it for her. I'm tired of you always choosing her. Bye, Mom. Click. Instant hugs and tears with my cousin and best friend. I don't know what I would have done without them. They both let me know they were so proud of me. And we fell asleep with more brandy and some happy weed. The next morning, I called into work and let my manager know what was going on and asked for the day off. Luckily, he was completely understanding and told me to take off the next 3 days. My cousin had to still go in, but my bestie got the day off to be with me. Next call was to get in with my doctor for testing, then to my fiancé's parents to let them know the engagement was off and why. To say his parents were angry was an understatement. Surprisingly, I got a call from one of his brothers to tell me he was sorry and suspected something was up with his brother, but never would have guessed it was my sister. He asked if there was anything he could do for me, and I asked him to go by the house to see if he was there or not so I could grab some of my things. He said he would do a drop-by with the pretense of checking on him. I was so thankful for his help. Off to the doctor's office I go with my bestie for support. When I say my doctor is the coolest guy, not to mention handsome and single is an understatement. He's never done anything inappropriate nor unprofessional, but we do joke because I am the troublemaker. However, when he saw my face and the state I was in, he knew something not funny was going on with me. I told him what I was going through, and he gave me a hug as I was about to break down in tears again. His nursing aide was standing behind him with her mouth on the floor in absolute horror of hearing the story. All she could repeat was, "Your sister?" So, I got all the testing done and he'll call when the results are in. As for perfect timing, the brother calls me to let me know that the house is empty now for at least an hour as he got my fiancée to go out for a drink at 11 a.m. He said that he looks like shit. We get to the house in 10 minutes and get to packing up my stuff in lightning speed. Luckily, I kept the boxes we moved in with in the storage closet and got all my clothes, documents, and a few sentimental keepsakes in 4 boxes, 2 in the trunk and 2 in the back seat. And we were off in 45 minutes. I took our engagement photo off the wall and left it shattered on the floor right at the front door. 10 minutes after leaving, my phone starts blowing up again. "Please, baby, please, what the hell ever." His brother texts me saying it was a sorry sight to see his brother break down in tears, sobbing how bad he screwed up. He also let me know how his parents showed up at the house and tore him a new AH. On top of the fact that my sister was still there when they showed up, she got a new one as well. Not sure if that even mattered to her, being that she has no sense of morality. That would explain the text I got from them saying they had given them a piece of their mind and I would always be a part of their family, unlike their son. Followed by another text asking if I had ever seen a sore on my sister's lip before. So she was having an active outbreak while making out with my fiancé. Just gross. Now, on to planning my revenge. I reached out to my sister's ex-husband. We've always been cordial, and he was a good guy destroyed by my sister and her antics. She tried to take him for everything in the divorce, even though she was the one that did wrong in the relationship. Thank God they didn't have any kids. I asked him if he knew of any of my sister's cheating partners. He let me know that he had a list, literally, a list almost a page long, during and immediately after the marriage. He asked me what was going on and I informed him of everything. He was disgusted, not only at the fact of what she did to me, but because some of the partners after their divorce were his married associates, he would not acknowledge them as friends anymore. He was thankful that he got out when he did to avoid her contagion. Right. By now my cousin is off work and we meet up at Bestie's house, partly because of her Ring doorbell notifications showing visits from the fiancé and even my sister to her house. Like, really, Trick? Her visit turned out to work towards my revenge, as my cousin took a snapshot of my sister's face, clearly showing that huge sore on her lip. I should have mentioned that my cousin is not one to play with. So, we get to looking up her partners from the list provided by her ex-husband on social media. Disgustingly, almost half of them are married. Not were married, but are married with and without kids. Granted, we are not idiots and didn't want to violate the law in taking revenge. We simply made a post on my page, no need to hide. The post included a close-up picture of my sister's face, visibly showing the sore with a caption of, "Do you remember going on this ride?" tagging everyone from the list provided by her ex-husband. Not only did I tag those on his list, I was aware of a few husbands of our cousins and aunts who have also fallen for her dirty 30s. Now all we need to do is sit back and wait. We ordered takeout, opened a bottle of wine, and watched stand-up comedy on Netflix. Laughter is always the best remedy, but we didn't even get to enjoy it that long. Not even 15 minutes after the post went up, my phone is pinging and pinging and pinging. Instead of them having to look over my shoulder, I just synced my phone to her TV, and we had a whole new show to watch. The fallout was epic. Responses from men and wives and girlfriends alike. I received a text from her ex-husband with one word, savage, with laughing emojis. Evidently, some of his associates reached out to him asking if he knew she had herpes and why didn't he warn them. Blah, blah, blah. Overlooking the fact that they knew she was, for some, his wife and others, his ex-wife. I guess they never heard of the bro code. He never bothered to let them know that he was negative for the virus. Let them suffer until tested kind of thing. And he called me savage. LOL. DMs from wives and girlfriends asking why I had tagged their men, I know right, or to thank me for opening their eyes. Along with DMs from some of the list, saying I was ruining their marriage and relationship, or asking if this picture was photoshopped, etc. To say a mad rush to clinics and doctors' offices is about to happen is an understatement. We popped some popcorn, and this became our new Netflix for almost an hour. Since it was getting late, we cleaned up and I went back with my cousin to stay at her house for the night. However, when we pulled into the driveway, who do we find sitting on her front steps? Fiancé looking like a puppy that had been kicked, beaten, and never washed. I had to do a double take to make sure it was actually him that I was looking at. My cousin gave me an inquisitive look and I said I got this. This was bound to happen sooner or later, so might as well get it over with. Again, he starts with the, I'm so sorry, and it never should have happened, and I don't even know how we got here, and I love you and only you, blah, blah, blah. It was so tiring. All I could do was to hold up my hand for him to stop with the rhetoric to ask him a few questions. You remember my past with how my dad cheated on my mom? Yes. You remember me telling you about my sister's antics? Yes. You remember going through issues from her with me? Yes. You were well aware of the fact that she had the herpes virus? Yes, but I held up my hand to him. Did you ever consider the fact that you could have given it to me? No. Well, yes, head hanging. If you really loved me, why would you put me at risk for something like that? Silence. Why did you propose to me, knowing you were screwing my sister? Because I love you. You love me, but you were screwing my sister? Long silence. It never should have happened. If the shoe was on the other foot and I had been the one that cheated and potentially exposed you to this BS, would you accept me back? Silence. Exactly. Here's your ring back and never contact me again. There's nothing more to say besides, get yourself tested, but by the look of that red spot on your lip, seems you already have the answer. I walked into the house and closed the door behind me, only to be immediately scooped up in a huge hug by my cousin saying, ex-husband was right. Girl, you are savage. Now let's get some sleep. Not going to lie, I did cry myself to sleep that night. The end of that chapter of my life. Come the next morning, I get a call from my doctor first thing. My results are negative. Thank you, God. But I will have to get tested again in 6 months. He asked me how I was holding up. I replied, actually, I got the closure I needed, and with these results, much better than I'd expected. He chuckled and said, should have expected nothing less, but still sorry you had to go through all of this. If I ever want to just get out or need someone to vent to, I'm here for you, not only as your doctor. I catch the Pikachu expression on my face in the mirror. Well, alrighty then. I said, thanks, but don't complain about it later. We both laugh and say goodbye. Yes, today is going to be a good day. So instead of wallowing around, I decided to go to a day spa to see if they could fit me in for a nice massage, facial, etc. I wanted the works. I deserve it after all of this. I even decided to call what would have been my mother-in-law, I call her, Moms, to invite her along, since brother had let me know that this was taking a toll on her as well. When she answered the phone, she sounded so excited to hear from me and started apologizing for her scumbag of a son. I chuckled and said, enough about him. Do you want to go out with me for a girl's day? I have everything planned out. It almost sounded like she was crying before hearing a shaky, yes, dear. Definitely yes. I told her to get ready because I would be there in 30 minutes to pick her up, and she didn't need to bring anything but her lovely self. When I pull up to pick her up, it seems like the whole family is waiting to greet me. Hugs and sorries for the idiot. And I'll always be a part of the family, etc. before Moms walks between everyone and says, we have things to do. Did I mention that I love this woman more than my own mother? Laughing, we get into the car and begin to back out the drive when who comes running up the sidewalk looking like that puppy mentioned before, only worse. Moms rolled down her window and yelled, what did I tell you, boy? This is no longer your home, and this beauty beside me is no longer your future wife. Get out of the damn way. Clicking her tongue, she turns back to me and shakes her head. Oh, how he has fallen, and it's all his own doing. And we get going. but I could see tears trying to build in her eyes. I grab her hand and say, "Have faith that he will eventually find his way. You did your part, and the rest is on him." She took a deep breath, and with a quick nod of agreement, we change the subject and continue on with lighthearted conversations. OMG, the pampering and relaxation of the day at the spa worked wonders. Mom's had her glow back. I would never want to be responsible, partly or not, in her being unhappy or stressed. We had the most fun out together, taking selfies showing off the glow up and just being carefree. Then she grabs my hands and says, "We're not done yet, girly. Let's go shopping. I need a new outfit and bag to go with this look." This part is on me, and I'm not taking no for an answer. Again, did I say I love this woman? You would have thought we were supermodels in Milan with our antics in the stores. It was like she shed 20 years. I sent some of the selfies to her husband while we were out without her knowing, and let's just say, if they could still have kids, one would have been made from his responses alone. It was beautiful to see that love does not always fade and made my heart full, even with my heartache. No need to hate on the real thing. As we are heading back to the car, I get a text from my mom asking, "What is going on?" "I'm getting outrageous messages from family about your sister." I told her to check her email and forwarded her the screenshots of the messages of her going after my fiancé and a link to the social media post. Oh yeah, my cousin made sure to screenshot everything when we went through his phone records. If she approves of what I did or not, I could really care less anymore. It was about time that she finally saw her real daughter and not the golden child. Even still, just that interaction with my mom had me shaking. Of course, Mom's noticed and pulled me in for the tightest and best hug, knowing what I needed without me having to say a word. I'm so blessed to have her in my life. When we got back to her house, her husband has pulled out all the stops to welcome his wife home. A red carpet, rose petals thrown down, with him in a suit waiting at the bottom of the stairs with flowers and glass of champagne. This is what years of love should look like. Mom's was crying, I was crying, and neighbors had come out to take photos of them and were crying. It was epic. The youngest brother comes and opens Mom's door and does a bow before helping her out of the car. So cute. Then it dawns on me that I should be videotaping this and start fumbling with my phone. Their sister starts laughing and says, "I got you, and will send you a copy." I replied, "Good, because I doubt if mine would even be in focus." She comes over and throws an arm around my shoulder and whispers to me, "You will always be family." That just broke me. Why couldn't my actual blood behave like this? I inquired how they pulled all of this together so quickly. She told me they were still at the house when I sent the pictures of Mom's, and they saw their dad's reaction, so decided to pull something together. Fortunately, they had everything except the rose petals, which only took a quick trip to the florist shop a couple miles away. The red carpet and champagne were remnants from her wedding some months ago. Then Pops clears his throat to get everyone's attention. "You don't have to go home, but you have to get the hell out of here, including my kids." He bends as if he's going to pick Mom's up to carry her in the house and stops halfway and says, "That might not be the best idea with what I have in mind." Smacks her on the butt and says, "Get in that house, woman. I got plans for you." Everyone burst out laughing. No better way to end this escapade. Pops had arranged for rooms for the kids at a hotel for them to get away and enjoy the amenities, so no one was left out. It was a great day. As I was pulling out of the driveway and turning to head back to my cousin's, I see fiancé sulking on the sidewalk looking from a distance. I almost felt bad for him, but not really. When I got to my cousin's house, my mouth hit the floor. It seems they had set up their own surprise for me. There is my doctor standing at the bottom of her stairs with a bouquet of flowers, looking dapper as ever in a suave blue suit. He comes and opens my door to help me out. Then I see my cousin and bestie jumping up and down when I get out of the car like, "Yes, girl." I'm at a loss. Like, how was he here? How did he know where I was? What was he doing here? Is he here for me? The questions just kept rolling through my brain. I couldn't focus. I have been called the dumbest smart girl before and felt that fit me perfectly right now. He hugs me laughing while saying, "You may want to close your mouth before the bugs fly in," then pulls back and asks me out for a date. Me, like an idiot, can only nod my head still not blinking. That only makes him laugh harder and turn to my crew and say, "I've never seen her at a loss for words before." They are whooping and cheering with one shouting, "Yes, girl," and the other, "Now that's the man for you." Finally, I snap out of it and smack him on the arm and ask, "So can you still be my doctor?" And he replied, he'd have it no other way. Today was a great day. Life goes on. Dear listeners, sending loads of love to Jane Norwood for her contribution, and to all our listeners, thank you for being part of this literary journey with us. And if you want to share your work with us, please send your work at the email mentioned in the description box, and we will publish it for our listeners at Lost Love Chronicles. Please share your thoughts in the comments section, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.